everybody except for Ron. Is that correct, Michelle?
I don't see Karen.
Karen.
Oh, yep, Karen too.
Hold on, there's some attendees that they're coming in a different way. So I've got Ron on there twice.
Jonathan and Robert Edgerton too are here for that second item, but we'll bring them in whenever you want.
We're just waiting for Karen.
Would it be appropriate before we get started to switch items 1 and 2 so that the Robert and Jonathan can get in and out?
Fine with me, Destin. When you said switch, excuse me, Destin, when you said switch items 1 and 2,
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said 1 and 2. I should have said new business. Move the
Isn't the other one just consent?
I'm looking at here. Wait a second.
The
we
other
have-
item is just approval of the
There-
minutes, so.
Roll.
morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, sir.
Oh boy.
So this is, I guess really it's I see that it did not get on there, the staff report for the discussion on future. But
Oh,
I sense it is discussion only, Ward. Could that be part of a staff report either way? Or in item 7?
I have the staff report.
I have the staff report as part of the packet, yeah.
Yeah, so do I. It's in the packet, but it didn't seem to make the.
Oh, it's not an agendized item.
Oh, no, it is. It is. It's not B. I didn't see it's A and B. So it is. It's just
Oh.
on new business as B.
Yeah, you're right. You're okay.
Okay.
Sorry. I thought, uh-oh.
So Destin, your request is to switch items 6A and 6B.
Correct.
Okay,
Please.
all right. I guess technically we have a quorum. Destin, do you want to send Karen a message and we can start out?
So
I'm sorry. It broke up right there. Stephen, I didn't hear all what you said. What we had a quorum. We'll go ahead and start the meeting.
I said, do you want to just send Karen a message, a reminder, but we don't have to,
Yes, I will do that right
we
now.
don't have to wait.
Do that right now.
Okay, so you've got that covered, Destin, and I have a hunch that maybe Ron is having issues fading in and out. That happened to him last night at a meeting, so we'll just let Ron struggle with whatever he's got going on. He knows how to deal with it. Okay, we'll we'll call to order the regular meeting of the Bishop Area Wastewater Authority on this October 19th, 2021. The time is 8:06, and this meeting is being conducted via Zoom teleconferencing as per the state COVID-19 guidelines. I'll go ahead and take the lead on the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would all join me, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
just
Thank you.
roll.
Michelle, would you please take the roll call, please?
Chairman Pachuki,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mahovey,
Here,
Board Member Stone. And he's here
He's here struggling.
twice. And Board Member Schwartz is absent.
Okay. Next item is public comment, and this is a time for members of the public to bring forward to the board any items that are not on the agenda.
I'm here.
Michelle, did we receive any written comments for this meeting?
We did not receive any written comments.
Thank you. And other than the participants in the meeting, we have no members of the public comment for the record. Item number 5 is consent calendar. Michelle or Destin, do we have anything there?
I will move that we approve the minutes of the last meeting and approve the consent calendar as is.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? I guess in this case, I can second. Michelle, would you like to poll the board?
Vice Chairman Mahovey,
Yes.
Chairman Pachuki,
Yes.
Board Member Stone. I think I'll go with a yes, maybe.
That sounds good, Michelle. We'll stand in for him.
Board of Directors of the Bishop Area Wastewater Authority meeting minutes held on July 20th, 2021, approved as written.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Item number 6, and this is where we're going to switch 6. Do we have everybody else on board that needs to be here? Well, we're going to switch them anyhow. Is that correct?
I mean, it doesn't matter.
Being
The other ones should be quick.
Yeah, you're correct. Let's take them in. All right, Jonathan and Robert just joined us. They must have heard us talking about them. So we can take 6B before 6A. We have Jonathan and Robert joined us. Can you folks hear us?
Yes, you can.
Yes, this is Jonathan. I can hear you.
Okay, Jonathan, Robert, this is Walt, and we've just started the meeting. The item of interest for you folks is coming up in just a moment. If you would hang tight, please.
Thank you.
So we have adoption of the resolution to continue to allow virtual BAWA board meetings.
All right, I'll take the lead. Ward cut me off if I had going anywhere sideways. So I guess effective immediately, AB 361 is going to allow for the continued use of remote meetings as long as there's an emergency is proclaimed or the county health doctor or somebody like that continues to support the social distancing, masking, and the guidelines for remote meetings. At this time, we do have that county health doctor recommendation. And so we're bringing this forward, this resolution by law to continue meeting remotely. And we'll bring it up, I guess, at each and every meeting going forward, as long as this continues to be in effect and continue with the remote meetings. At this time, I guess the staff would just recommend that we adopt the resolution as written in attachment 1. And trying to keep it short and sweet. I think we all know what this is about.
I have one question about this item. I think when we had to do it for the city of Bishop, it said that there was some weird language about how it needs to be readopted every 30 days. Does that apply to this board since we only meet quarterly? Or is it just because we're in our actual incorporation documents, it only requires a quarterly meeting that we're okay not having impromptu meetings strictly to adopt this ordinance? Do you have any insight on that, Ward?
Director Mahovey, you're correct. Technically, the legislation says we're supposed to readopt it every 30 days. We're taking an attitude in our firm that if you just adopt it at each one of your meetings, you're in substantial compliance. We don't think that it was the intent of the legislature to have boards just meet within 30 days just to pass this resolution. So we feel that by just putting it on your consent calendar every time you meet, even if it's only quarterly, you're in substantial compliance of the legislation.
Okay. Since, I mean, the way I see it, this gives us the option to continue things. We can always go back in person if the county isn't experiencing even more like widespread community spread than it was last year at this time. So I mean, it seems reasonable.
Further discussion? If none, do we have a motion to adopt the resolution?
I'll move that we adopt the resolution.
We have a motion. We have,
I'll
a
second.
and Ron joined in to second. Would you please poll the board, Michelle?
Vice Chairman Mahovey,
Yes.
Board Member Stone,
Aye.
Chairman Pachuki.
Yes.
Motion approved for the adoption of resolutions to continue to allow virtual BAWA board meetings.
Thank you. Now, moving on to 6B. Thank you, Jonathan and Robert, for hanging on with us. Destin, would you like to take the lead on 6B, please?
Absolutely. And I just got a text from Karen. She's logging on. Something's going on this morning. All right. So as we all know, the BAWA, we've been pursuing improvements to our discharge of wastewater, secondary treated wastewater. Over the past year, we've worked closely with NRCS, Laurel Ag, NRCS, Lumos, and Helix. And through these efforts, I've gained, and I think we've all gained, the knowledge, and mostly the knowledge in the enormity of this project is what we're finding out is the enormity and financial impacts of this irrigation project. We've all gotten see a look at the irrigation plans and an updated quote of almost $3.1 million, up from 1.4 million only 4 months ago. You know, that's mostly driven by the cost of pipe. It's just going through the roof, and there's no sign that that's going down anytime soon. We'll probably, from my best guess and talking with some of the pipe suppliers and distributors, they feel like it'll continue to keep going up too, unfortunately. So at this time, I just would like to have a discussion amongst the board of, you know, how do we, what do we see going forward for the BAWA? Is this, do we continue with an irrigation project? You know, and I guess I should thank Robert and Jonathan for being here. You know, we're finding out in the environmental process that the hurdles are getting higher and higher every time we open up another process. We're looking at potential, you know, I'm taking Robert's, you know, professional judgment on this one. He's saying we could see 5 to 10 years before we could achieve or get permitted for all the irrigation project. You know, there's Lahontan has made some serious comments, I guess, about what they think this process will look like as they review the CEQA document when we get to that point with them. And they also brought up a big point about lining our ponds. You know, they've talked about it in the past, and we've all kind of known it was this elephant in the room that we didn't think we needed to deal with, because it really isn't, I think, what our problem is. But lining ponds is another $5 to $10 million effort. They're considering it winter storage, and that we're percolating water through those ponds that's still got plenty of nitrogen in it, in all forms of nitrogen, and that water is just percolating right into the groundwater as well. I think, you know, I'm not doing due justice to the permitting process and the environmental process, and I would ask that Robert, if you don't mind, can you kind of explain where we're going and what the hurdles will be to get through that?
Thanks, Dustin. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll do my best. Good morning, board and Director Deshawn. Thank you for inviting myself and Jonathan here today. I'm happy to talk to you informally about some of the things that we've seen in our investigations to date. I represent Helix Environmental Planning. We had a small contract with BAWA earlier this year to do some preliminary wetland delineation, wetland mapping of the area immediately south of the wastewater treatment plant, in advance of hopefully assisting the board with moving forward with their irrigation scheme to dispose of some of the treated wastewater south of the wastewater treatment plant. We did our mapping exercise, and as Director Deshawn has probably shared with you, to no surprise to anyone, it's quite extensive. The lands immediately south support a number of different perennial and ephemeral wetland features, signatures that are coming from the wastewater treatment plant to begin with, and are probably melding with some natural aspects that exist on the ground already. Regardless, it's a pretty substantial, robust system there, and the potential irrigation plan, disposal plan, would most likely interrupt hydrologically the features that are located down there. They would, at least in a temporary manner, impact them on the surface. We discussed the potential hurdles in regards to that with Director Deshawn, and primarily they are regulatory permitting hurdles through the three primary regulatory agencies that deal with waters of the United States and waters of the state, and that's the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Lahontan Regional Water Quality, Quality Control Board, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. My suggestion to the director at the time that we started having the follow-on discussions after our wetland mapping exercise was to engage with the Lahontan board informally to gauge how much of a partner they would be willing to be in going through the exercise of implementing the irrigation plan. And in an email from the board to the director dated August 6th, there were a number of 16 points, as a matter of fact, identified in that email that really kind of read the letter of the law to the director. And of course, Lahontan is a state water regulatory agency, and of course they do everything to the letter of the law. What isn't really spelled out in there is, in my estimation, as a 25-year practitioner of regulatory permitting, I'm really not seeing a roadmap here of them willing to work towards a solution that includes the irrigation plan in a really efficient manner. And as the director mentioned previously, I have said to him that the regulatory hurdles that appear to be in place and appear to be the board's position could be a lengthy exercise. I have gone through similar levels of entitlement processing with regulatory agencies that have taken upwards of a decade. This is a substantial system, as I mentioned before. It does contain features that are regulated and are under the authority of the Lahontan board. And I just am not seeing a really clear roadmap here. And I would combine that with also what the director mentioned, and Jonathan, please step in and help me, because I'm not an engineer like Jonathan is, but the requirement for lining of the pits out there is very problematic as well.
And so one question I have with regards to this lining of the ponds is, I mean, this plan doesn't plan to touch any of the ponds, does it? The irrigation scheme. So, I mean, when I'm doing construction on my house and I'm not touching certain elements, I don't necessarily have to bring everything else up to some newly defined code that was passed in the past year. So what is what how do I reconcile that in this particular project? Like, we're not actually touching the pond, so.
I agree, and I had that discussion a little bit with Lahontan, actually. So you're right, it doesn't have anything to do with our project, but this new project is going to create a new discharge permit. With that discharge permit, Lahontan, what they're saying is, we're not going to, in your environmental, this won't be a comment or a hurdle to get over. It will be your new permit will require that your ponds be lined. Once we complete the irrigation project, they'll say, now your new permit is requiring lining of your ponds because they're percolation ponds. And so their job is also to, protect the groundwater. And in their opinion, the unlined ponds are affecting groundwater quality down there.
And so, I mean, can't you play the same game and say then, okay, so issue us a new permit for irrigation because those other permits are still under City of Bishop and Eastern Sierra Community Services District, and those permits aren't going to be touched then.
I like where you're going with it, but unfortunately, the Lahontan wants to update the cities.
I know
and
that
the
it's to go to just one permit, but I mean, they're not making it easy.
Exactly, and that no, they don't. Chairman Mahovey, or Chairperson Mahovey, okay, Stephen.
Just call me Stephen.
So what they're saying, though, in effect, is that in Jonathan's efforts, which he could talk about here in a minute, but he's also doing a new update to both the city and the district's permits as well. That's requested by Lahontan. So they're going to do all three at one time. That's where they're catching it, getting us on this. And it really was something that shocked me that they threw that pond lining in there. And I went right to Robert, and then Robert says they can't tell you that, but Jay Cass and Lahontan says, oh yeah, we can. That we're going to require it.
But just for clarification again, is this the kind of thing that is it like when you call for customer service and you get one person who is extremely unhelpful, but then you call back and get somebody else who's actually quite helpful? Is this kind of scenario, or is Lahontan small enough that you're only dealing with one person?
So yeah, we're dealing with one person, and that one person is also just retired last week. And he walked off, and I'm not sure what happened. He left unannounced, decided on Monday morning to retire. So, you're right. It's a guessing game now. And who, no one's slated to take his position. There's a couple of very young people that were kind of over our plants, essentially just doing inspections and such. I don't know that they'll be the people in charge, but the unfortunate part is when this email came from Mr. Cass, because he also CC'd everybody in almost the state of California within this, not just Lahontan, but the State Water Quality Control Board. So, and as Robert got alluded to earlier, the scary part about this is he didn't even acknowledge that we were doing a project that would be good for the groundwater. He only threw up obstacles. So he didn't even throw us a bone to say, you know what, here's all these issues I see, but keep going. We like you. We want you to do something. It was a very interesting process. And I had no idea Jay was going to leave. And I had a candid conversation with him last week for about 2 hours, or the week before, I'm sorry. And he's basically hedging his bets to force something more. He wants, and the state would like to see, effluent discharge numbers, not groundwater. They want to see clean, essentially somewhat clean water coming out of a plant. And that's very much the attitude of the Lahontan region in general. Remember, they uncovered Tahoe as well. So,
and to be clear, I mean, that's ultimately what I think we all want. And we've always we've always known that a new plant is down the line. A new plant is also very expensive, especially for our small area, and it would impact rates severely. And so we were obviously viewing this as kind of a stopgap measure to give us time to be able to get all our ducks in order to be able to do that. And so, I mean, I'm sorry, Robert, did you have more you wanted to say? Or?
No, I really didn't. The director really did a good job of summing it up. And what he's saying is this is my assessment as well, is that we've got something written here, although it's from an individual. It's the board. I mean, it's with a signature line at the bottom, and it says it's from the board. And as the director mentioned, it CC's just about everybody. Yes, when you're dealing with regulatory authorities and regulatory permitting, you're dealing with individuals, but those individuals do speak on behalf of their agencies. And if this is the agency's stance, there really isn't a whole lot of wiggle room here.
And I'd like to say that I for one, would love to continue to pursue this. And I'm not, and this is not a conversation to say we can't do this. It's more of a discussion of what is best for our ratepayers right now. Are we going to spend somewhere between maybe $5 to $10 million? And then knowing that we have a 71 and a 50-something-year-old plants down there, and then we've kind of spent all of our money, and then all of a sudden we wake up one morning and the district experienced it once. They had a crack in their digester, build a new plant. Then we don't have, do we have no money, and we're trying to figure out how to do it. I just want to get the board's feeling on how to pursue it. I have no issues. I like the challenge of trying to get the irrigation project done, because I think it's a great project, but I also don't know that it's a great, if it's the right direction with the ratepayers' money. A new plant's a big, giant number.
And so, I mean, I guess that would be part of my question, because when we were originally going down this route, we thought it would be on order of like $1 or $2 million to be able to go down the irrigation route, depending on how much DWP was going to charge us for at least phase 1 of the land. And now, I mean, of course, that would be a completely different calculation if we're now talking about $10+ million in many years. And so I guess what I would like to know is, like, do we actually have now that we've gone through this, a more firm estimate of what the cost would be, what the timeline would be for actually pursuing the irrigation project, and an estimate for what the cost would be and what the timeline would be with regards to actually pursuing a brand new plant. That's what I would like to know before actually making a firm decision.
Yeah, and again today, I don't think I was expecting a decision. I think it was very just a pointed discussion that to bring up the points. We're still, DWP is nearing a point that the survey is done with the property. They're actually got us off the hook for paying for an appraiser. They have to do the appraisals themselves. So we're getting closer to knowing a number for that. Everything, it seems like, unfortunately, this just keeps pushing out. Where's these numbers? What are going to be the total numbers? The only one we have a hard number on is the irrigation itself, the project of phase 1 of the irrigation of $3.1 million. I don't think, Robert might be able to help me with this one, and Jonathan, the environmental process to get through it and get the permits, that time sounds like it could take a long time, and we don't know the cost yet of mitigation and stuff. But I'm going to shut up. Sorry, Robert and Jonathan. I keep talking for you. So either of you have maybe Robert.
Jonathan, do you have anything?
Yes, I'm happy to jump in. Members of the board, Director Deshawn, this is Jonathan Lutzbrans with Loomis and Associates, and we've been working on a couple ancillary items to support the permitting effort, particularly with DDW, and then updates to both discharge permits with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And just to echo Director Deshawn's comments, the costs in aggregate, when you consider the construction components for the irrigation process, the uncertainties with the permitting process, both cost and duration or the schedule, on top of what seems to be a pretty clear mandate from the regional board on lining ponds sufficient to store wintertime storage, you're likely looking at 60 or greater percent of the cost of constructing a new plant. And so we're talking, if wintertime storage is 5 to 10 million, probably trending closer to the 10 million side of that spectrum once we vet out the actual requirements, in addition to the 13 million for phase one of the irrigation. Potentially, we're looking at a project as high as 13 million and, potentially a couple of years to get to that point. Meanwhile, your two plants are not getting any younger, and the investment in your infrastructure is not really getting any better. So you're getting into a very costly proposition while incurring more risk, really just associated with the age of your existing plants. And so I think the question that the board should be pondering is, as Director Deshawn mentioned, what is the best use of your ratepayers' funds moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, and I think, that those are the kind of things that we'd want to see. I do think in the near term, we should at least still be pursuing the land acquisition with DWP.
I would agree with that.
If we can, I mean, regardless of what happens down the line, like a new power plant or a new sewage plant is going to be a lot more power intensive. And if we at least have some land, we might be able to mitigate some of the power costs. So, and I mean, I think we should definitely continue pursuing that. And then I would like to see maybe a breakdown of some of the numbers for like best case scenario, worst case scenario on cost of the two different routes and timelines of those. But now I'll shut up. What are the other,
This is
other board members saying?
Does a discharge permit
Well, this
typically
is-
last? Like, do they expire, or do you have one until you make a change or ask for a new permit?
So right now we have a permit that's 1994 is when it was issued. The state has essentially told all of their regions that they need to update everyone's permits. We have done I think we've done a great job of keeping that from happening because of the progress we've made. The state's thrilled to death that we have a JPA now that they never thought we would work together. So they've kind of pushed us off. And I'll be honest with you, we really aren't a bad plant. We're not this terrible people that are dumping polluted water all over the place. And they recognize that as well. Our numbers are okay. So they're not pushing, so much to get that permit done today, but they're waiting on us to make a decision on what we're doing, and then they would tailor a permit according to that. So they and I'm sorry if that's a long answer, but no, right now we have a 20, however many old we're getting into this thing, 26-year-old permit.
But they could come in and just say, like, we need to renew your permit, despite the fact that you guys have been going through all these efforts anyway.
Absolutely, they could. They always have to keep in mind that when they make decisions at their level, that they have to be good for the people of the state. And they've been very clear about that, whether they wanted to tell us that or not. So that's another reason they haven't just walked in and forced a new permit on us. Because if they had their choice, they'd say, here's your new permit. you can't have nitrogen levels above 10 in your discharge into the story because it will not affect the groundwater then. That's what they'd like to have, but they've been able to be very patient with us. You know, patient as in like 11 years now to wait on this permit. And I'll be honest with you, would we make a decision just if we're decided we want a new plant, I would go down there and meet with them and love to take two of you with me as well and say, you know, here's our plan, but we're talking 5 years plus down the road before we have money to do any of this stuff, you know, and buy some time. Because you know, that they are giving us, and which is a plus, we are getting a new permit right now for the discharge. And that will be a BAWA permit. But
without having to line the ponds?
Well, they're getting, yeah, it's that water, reclaimed water permit to spread the water. Because currently there is no permit, and this is something I just learned, that there is no permit for the DWP portion of the current discharge area because Don Tatum, Jim Tatum's father, is no longer alive, and it was issued to him.
Okay.
Yeah, so to be honest, you know, it is, we dance with them a lot trying to get through things, but they've been pretty darn good because if the wrong person wanted to, they could say, you don't have a permit at all anymore, except for 40 acres. So
And I have one last question. Is there like a precedent of the state helping communities with building plants? Like, is there money out there that we could go after?
absolutely. And Jonathan's probably more well-versed than I, but with the new whatever bill they're trying to get done right now, there's going to be a lot of money for water and sewer infrastructure. That's why I would propose that we ask for more time so that we can seek those. And, you know, at one point in time, the tribe, which I think they would still be willing to, on a new plant, kick in a fair share. They actually were willing to put in, Walt would know better than I, it was $3 to $4 million. I think they were offering at one time to add to a new plant. And they have a lot of revenue sources. So
they do have a lot of expansion plans as well. Yeah.
Yes, and they actually have a large housing development on hold because the BIA says until you have a place for your sewer to go, we're not letting that happen.
This is Jonathan with Loomis. Director Deshawn, were you looking for me to add to that, or?
Yeah, absolutely, because I know you stay pretty well abreast on funding and stuff.
Correct. We've been tracking a number of potential funding opportunities coming out of the American Rescue and Protection Act, or ARPA. And while there's still some uncertainty about how those funds will be distributed to projects, they have already been allocated, and the state of California has received a significant allocation of that federal funding. And on top of that, there is the pending infrastructure bill that is still being deliberated on in Congress, which to the tune of trillions of dollars. So there is a lot of money on the horizon, with a significant portion of it specifically earmarked for water and wastewater projects. The other aspect of this project that makes it very appealing for funding opportunities is under the JPA, we're consolidating, or potentially we're consolidating two plants. And so anytime you've got an opportunity to consolidate municipal entities, there's a lot of funding that's available for that, particularly through the state revolving fund, which would be administered through DDW. So we're heading into an advantageous season for funding opportunities specific to the types of work that this project will encompass.
Jonathan, this is Walt. What's your best guess with respect to how far along the plans need to be in order to be in the proper queue for some of this funding? In other words, do these projects have to be shovel ready now or next year? What's your best guess?
That's a great question, Walt. The best guess for ARPA funds is those funds would need to be spent probably by 2026. Most of those funds have been allocated with a sunset. With respect to the infrastructure bill, the closer you could be to shovel ready, the easier it is to fund. And to Robert's scope of work, the more of the environmental components that have been addressed, the more attractive the projects become for funding when the funding's available. If we're looking at a planning horizon, it's probably a 60-month effort to go from pre-engineering and planning all the way through construction on a treatment plant. So even if we start today, it's about a 5-year horizon. And so phasing or allocating costs for the pre-planning, engineering design, permitting, those are all reimbursable or potentially reimbursable activities that could be designated for the ARPA funds, and then have the project in queue ready for infrastructure bill funding once Congress has affirmed and passed that bill.
Jonathan, the work that was done previously on plant feasibility study, and you were involved in that with your previous employer, how much of that work is applicable and can help kind of get us a quicker start into the process if we're to go down that trail?
That's a great question. And as I was preparing for this particular meeting, I was reviewing some of the original planning and feasibility studies that had been prepared under R.O. Anderson Engineering, which I had participated in. And I think you're in a very good position to build upon a lot of those prior assumptions. And so you would not necessarily be starting from scratch or from zero. We could build off the work done previously. We'd want to go and reaffirm, make sure that it's consistent with the direction of the JPA and the BAWA for whatever the preferred alternative becomes. But the good news is you're not starting from zero at this point.
Okay.
Paul,
Question?
may I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Jonathan, how much of these funds are loan versus grant funds?
That's also a great question. And I don't have a detailed answer for you right now, Mr. Phillips. I'm optimistic for a couple of reasons. One I mentioned is the consolidation component. The other is potential for inclusion of disadvantaged communities as well as the tribe. So those three considerations certainly make it an appealing project for grant funding, or what is also referred to as principal forgiveness, which is essentially grant funding. That said, interest rates continue to be historically low. And I do understand that there's potential for that to change as we head into the next fiscal year. But the grant funding that could be available historically has been about 62% of market loans. So even if the whole project can't be grant funded, you're still looking at a very, very low interest rate on loans if that's where the funding needs to come from.
Thank you.
I have another question. Jonathan, the plants that you've seen built, new plants in other communities, is it something where we would hire a company like yours to be the project lead and source the grant and make the project happen? Or is it something that you do in collaboration with the community, and whereas like Director Deshawn would be the one looking for those grants and figuring out how the project goes in? Or is it, can you just kind of give me some insight into what you've seen with other communities on how they've made it happen?
Of course. And so to answer your question directly, yes, our firm and others like us can function as the lead in looking for funding and working closely with the municipality on preferences for funding. As an example, we've helped a water district in Lake Tahoe get secure entire grant funding for mitigation at a well and installation of a treatment plant. And so that was 100% principal forgiveness. Conversely, we're working with another water district to the south of us in Carson Valley, and they've elected to pursue private financing, taking advantage of the current interest rates and not having to jump through all of the hoops, so to speak, associated with grant funding. So we've seen both approaches, and we've helped facilitate both approaches. There's also grant consultants that are available to help entities look for, identify, and then secure the grant funding. And we've also worked with municipalities that handle that all internally. So I guess the overall answer is we can go any direction that the BAWA would wish to proceed.
Just for your information, the city has recently gone under contract with a grant consultant that would be available to work with BAWA on this if necessary.
And that's a great approach.
Yeah, I actually have a meeting with them Thursday afternoon, and that's going to be one of the things that I will. They're looking to see what each department needs, and that I'm going to turn them on to that plant idea right off the bat, as well as others. But yes. So kind of at this point, I think we've talked about a lot of things, a lot of big numbers. I think it was great. It was actually a good discussion, but it's also it's not a thing that we need to make today. We just need to figure out, something to think about for the next 3 months, I guess it is, to our next meeting. But, we're at that point where we either spend some more money right now on irrigation project that, which I still love the idea. I do believe that we continue moving in the path, like Stephen said, of DWP, because no matter what we do, we're always going to have water that needs to be discharged, and land may never be available again. That land also, a big portion could be a solar array out there that powers this plant. And if we take up a bunch of that space with solar, then we still need more. We probably will never see phase 3 of phase 2 of DWP's land acquisition, but continue down the path with phase 1. And at least let's hear the numbers on the cost of that land. We need to get to that point. We haven't even heard that yet.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. My take on it. I think we should continue at least pursuing the DWP land acquisition, get the estimate from them. I think it would be good to actually have, I've heard 3.1 million, 13 million, 5 million thrown around, but it'd be good to actually have that collated so that we can do that, get to the point of actually doing that cost benefit analysis. And so that's what I would like to see before we actually have to make a decision. But I think that would keep us going until the next round. It would also be good to see when in that estimate of money and timing, what kind of requirements Lahontan would be putting for a new plant as well, so that we're actually comparing apples to apples with regards to not only cost of the irrigation project, but also how lengthy the permitting process will be for the irrigation process or project versus cost of a new plant and the permitting process for the new plant as well.
That I will make that happen. And a lot of that on the, just quickly, I will say that the efforts that Lumos did, R.O. Anderson, we did work closely with Lahontan. They're one of those regulatory agencies that they won't really tell you what you have to do, which is unfortunate. But we did come in an agreement of 10 on total nitrogen for a new plant, which is, they kind of, the cost is commensurate with how much nitrogen you want to remove. 10 is that's as high as they would go and as low as we wanted to go. So that working through that is kind of done already. So that's very helpful, because that also how much your plant's going to cost.
Good questions, good input. Thank you, Jonathan and Robert.
Yes.
Really good questions. Here's kind of where I'm at, and I'd like to get a reality check from the rest of the participants on this call. No matter what options are chosen for BAWA, essentially the city and the district, we're dealing with significant dollars. Likely the minimum that I see, minimum requirements moving forward, would be pond lining and an irrigation system. So we are into the 13 to $15 million total cost. And that would be near term. When I say near term, maybe within the next 3 years. But then that still doesn't relieve us from, as Destin pointed out, a plant, a newer plant, consolidated plant, given the age of both of our plants, and given that Wahhaton will just, they will be requiring that. So looking at the magnitude of the dollars, the timing, this is the most significant thing to hit our district and the city for decades at least. How would y'all feel about getting, I'll call it a workshop for a better term, Ward might correct me, but how would you all feel about getting the district and the city the district board and the city council together at one time in one place in discussing the alternatives, the approximate estimated costs in today's dollars, and projecting that, the alternatives, the timings, the anticipated requirements from Wahhaton. Basically, I guess you could call it a strategic planning meeting where we lay it all out. The impact to our ratepayers at best, even with grant funding and options to reduce the pain, at best, our ratepayers are going to take a severe hit. And how do we deal with that? So there's some big questions. I don't think it's to our benefit to just push this forward very far. I think the sooner we act, the better, so that we could get Jonathan or whomever we chose to start the effort and start looking at grant funding. There's a lot to be done, and the sooner we do it, the more likely we'll be in a better position in queue for any funding that might be available. Would you all be open to a joint workshop of that nature?
My gut is no, just because there is a lot of administrative stuff. That's what goes into setting up a full council meeting, and I think that these sorts of discussions. I mean, Karen and I have been involved. We know all the nuances. It's pretty. I don't know that it'd actually be constructive to try to bring everyone up to speed and expect to have a fruitful discussion. My gut is that it would just blow up and actually delay the process even more, as opposed to just, I mean, we were elected and put on this board to address those exact issues. So, I mean, that's just my gut with regards to having a full board on board meeting. I mean, we know how challenging it is even to get the city council and the full board of supervisors to meet, because in the 3 years that I've been on the city council, it's happened exactly 0 times, not for lack of interest from the board involved. I don't know, Karen, you can correct me if you think
what I think would be beneficial is maybe doing some strategic homework first, maybe between Destin and Jonathan. And then when it comes to some decisions regarding, big spends, then we maybe bring it back to the council, or we have a discussion. But I think a discussion at this point might be too early for our city council, because they don't have enough background in what we're talking about. And then, as Stephen alluded to, it could get just confusing and not productive. But I do think if it comes to a time where major decisions need to be made with financial impacts, I think we could get some homework done first before we go down a strategic planning route.
Okay.
I don't know. What do you think about that, Walt?
I know that our board would be very interested in meeting with y'all as soon as possible, but I think Karen, you brought up a good point. There can be some more work done before we have that meeting. And between Jonathan and Robert in particular, and then Destin. Destin, a question for you. Given the recent change, Jay's departure from Lahontan, and the fact that we really haven't used our communication network within Lahontan to the fullest, and we do have that option. We have an exercise. It's one of those things where you don't make those phone calls any more than you need to, and I've done it in the past. I'm prepared to do it again. Destin, do you think the time is right to start having some discussions at higher level in Lahontan, or bringing them into this, briefing them? What is your position?
I do feel that it could be beneficial. I know that, well, I'm trying to, is it Patty? I'm trying to think of her name. I'm drawing a blank on her name. That's was above Jay. But anyhow, her and Mike Plasiak is back. And I know both of them have been very encouraged. Actually, I think you mentioned it, Walt, that Mike Plasiak was almost in shock that we had formed a JPA while he was gone for a couple of years. He never saw that happening. I think that it would behoove us to at least have the discussion with them of where we're at and what we're doing and the magnitude of what's going on. Because the last thing I want is some new person assigned to that position, because new people just tend to say it's easier just to make rules. Let's just make the bishop do this. We want to start it. And if they're on, we can get them on board, which I feel strongly I could do that with them. They would be able to direct that new person to continue to work with us rather than just start firing off shots, which could happen easily with the new person that walks in. So and I apologize, you guys, I can't think of her name, but they are the two tops at the Lahontan region.
Are you talking about Patrice Copeland?
Patrice, thank you, Robert. Yeah, Patrice and Mike Plasiak. I think it's would be time well spent to have that discussion with them.
I concur, Director. I think it's compelling that the individual that wrote that email is no longer involved, and I would agree that a face-to-face informal meeting would be well served.
If
I have one other quick question. I'm sorry, Walt, go ahead.
If y'all don't mind, I'll try to give Mike Plasiak a call in the near future, and periodically I touch base with him, and I have for over probably 10 years in non-Sur District related matters that we've interfaced with and so forth. So I have a pretty good rapport with Mike. We have mutual professional respect. So I'll give Mike a call and just try to bring him up to speed on where we're at. He asked that I do that periodically, and we won't leave Patrice out of the loop at all. We'll bring her in probably after I touch base with Mike. That's probably what he'll ask me to do. And at that point, we'll just keep everybody informed. There are some questions I have about what Jay did when he sent that email, why he did it in the way he did. And I think the only person that can shed some light on that might be Mike Plasiak. So I'd like to start there and take it, see where it goes. Yeah. Go ahead, Karen.
I think that's a solid strategic move. I do have a question, just circling back to our discussion regarding ratepayers. Jonathan and Robert, in the sewer plants, the plants that you guys have seen with the one in Tahoe and Carson, what was the impact on ratepayers with their different grant and loan routes of funding their plants? Do you know?
This is Jonathan with Loomis for the record. To answer your question, it varies. And so with the grant funded project, the impact to ratepayers was essentially zero. And that particular entity is governed by the California Public Utilities Commission. And so rates are set in collaboration with the commission through a hearing. And it's a fairly extensive process and requires a lot of vetting and justification for those rates. With respect to the other entity, it's a general improvement district, so not governed by the PUC, but it is a public agency. They have set a rate plan that increments rates on an annual basis based on forecasting their capital improvements that the board had approved. And so incremental rate increases for their ratepayers. It went through the public meeting process, and it was, I don't know if palatable is the right word, but it wasn't arduous or met with significant opposition. And they've adopted, I believe Waterworth is the software. And there's a variety of softwares available, or you could choose to work with a rate consultant. But in any case, establishing a rate study or a rate approach to accomplish the projects in an entity's capital improvement plan is generally the process that most districts or entities would go through. And Walt, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the district was working with a rate consultant previously.
We have just initiated our rate study. We do it periodically, and we were due for a rate study independent of the discussions that we're all having this morning. And the consultant who's doing that rate study for us is on standby waiting for some numbers to plug in with regard to our major decisions that we're discussing here, new plant versus pond lining and so forth. And they're big numbers and they'll impact our rates severely. And we have to move forward with that. We can't put that on hold any longer. So we're going to be plugging in some big placeholders, and our ratepayers are going to react accordingly.
Okay, thanks, both of you.
And I think our rate study is due in 2 years, I believe.
20, we should start one next year,
Right.
and have them go in effect of July of 23.
And Karen, bear in mind that the rate impact of, say, a new plant is not just the cost of the plant, because these new plants are extremely energy heavy. And so just the day-to-day running maintenance operations is an increase over what our current plants require.
Yep. Very well put, Stephen.
Yeah. So I mean, just to kind of, I think, summarize what we're saying, I think, Walt, I mean, I think we would want to do the homework on actually getting the estimates of the numbers. You guys need that anyway for your rate study. And I think once we actually have the two paths presented to us, then we can have that presentation done to us. We have a discussion amongst ourselves, if there's anything else any other bits of information that we think we need before making that decision. And then I do think at that point, it would be useful to have that presentation done to the individual boards. And not, I don't know, the logistics of actually having the double board meeting might be onerous. So I think we can deal with that when it comes time. But I think it could definitely be the kind of thing that two people from each of the board could attend the other board's presentation, et cetera, et cetera. So we could work that out. But I think that's what I'd want before we go and actually open the can to the whole boards. That's my 2 cents on it.
Well, your recommendation to have some representatives kind of cross over into the other meetings, that makes a lot of sense, Stephen, rather than if you say logistically it's difficult to make happen. At least have, yeah, so well put. And let's look at that as we get there.
All right. Well, I don't want to cut any other board members off if you have anything else to add, or should we? I think we have great direction. I have great direction where to go. And this is exactly the discussion I was hoping for. So I will put numbers together. I guess we can't decide, it's not on the agenda right now, but to moving forward with Jonathan or whoever, we need to get that formalized, how we want to move that forward. And it maybe could be, I hate special meetings, but maybe it's a special meeting quickly to put together, just a quick vote of approve a contract. So I will work on that and get that done as soon as possible.
Thank you, Destin. Question for you, Destin, and everyone on here. Recognizing that, for example, pond lining, let's say the number is 10 million. What the district would like to see, and I would think the city would also, is some sort of how would those costs be shared? In other words, if the district has more pond area to line, shouldn't the district pick up more, and so forth? So while the costs, the aggregate costs are being developed, can we also ask Jonathan and Robert to look at any proportional costs, so that as the district moves through our rate study, we can have a better feel for our agency's separate responsibilities for the financial aspects. Does that make sense?
I mean, it seems like that we've done all this work to join, and now we're talking about looking at differences. I don't know. It doesn't strike me as in the spirit of the JPA, but I don't know. What do other people think?
Well, Walt, this is Ron, Walt. I think talking about the plant and what Stephen is alluding to there, in my opinion, that ought to be which each of the entities, the production to the plant, the volume, let's call it. Down the line, it seems that ought to be the basis for contribution of cost to each entity.
Okay. Stephen, what's your response to that?
I mean, that seems more sensible. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that this seems like more of a hypothetical that, like, wouldn't we want to, I guess I'd have to think about it more. I mean, I don't think that I think we can look at that when we actually look at the numbers and see how to divide it. I don't know that we can start looking at ideas on how to split the costs. Sure. But I mean, so far the endeavors that we've been taking, we've just been splitting it down the middle, haven't we?
We have, but I think what we've been talking about so far, a split down the middle, is equitable. But in certain portions of future investments, we may want to look at each agency's flow contribution.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good point. We might want to do that for sure.
But the idea that you came up with, Stephen, just to get the total big figure numbers to start with, and then we can look at them and sit down and say, at least back of the envelope sort of proportional things at this stage. But it would help, as I said, it would help our rate study to get us closer to the reality that we'll be looking at. Okay, good enough. That's all I needed.
Okay.
It's really not, it kind of is my business, I guess, as an administrator. Well, does your rate study need to start like right now, or can it wait till I mean, when are they going to affect July 1, or can they wait till July to start?
We would like the rates to go into effect in July, which means we need to get started now.
Okay. Fair enough. Just this, I feel like we'll have a whole lot more information by July.
Well, we will, but unfortunately, we pushed the rate study down the road as far as we could, in part because of everything that's been going on. So we've given the consultant Bartle Wells, we've given them the green light to start, and they're starting to gather information as we speak.
Would, you know, it's a little bit ahead of timing, and unfortunately, but it almost feels a little bit like a concerted effort on at least on the sewer side with the two agencies might be beneficial to everybody, and the cost might be commensurate that way. It's a little, you know what I'm saying? If we could wait, that was my only thought, is doing somewhat of the wastewater stuff almost together. Because I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, I like to think about 10 and 20 years down the road, even that, you know, the one point is going to be one plant. And, you know, I wanted as many ways as we can to be together is probably beneficial to everybody.
I agree, Destin, and just based on Stephen and Destin, your comments, just a thought I had, and Jen, do a reality check for me here. It might be wise for the district to enable Bartle Wells, the consultant, to continue with their work and get down the road as far as we can, because there is a lot of work that can be done now. But as BAWA does develop a better feel for timing and magnitude of expenses, we can feed that into Bartle Wells with a higher level of accuracy than our initial estimates would be. And the July deadline, or the July target date, Jen, as we approach that, could we push that into the future a bit?
Our last rates increase started in October. So yes, if we needed more information with the rates, then yes, it can be pushed.
Okay, well, Destin, maybe we have common ground here, Destin. We'll go ahead and start the rate study, and as BAWA develops numbers, we'll feed those numbers into the rate study and maybe revise some of Bartle Wells, where it may take a little back and forth, and there may be a little bit of scope change in their work, but the district can deal with that. So we'll try to make it happen. We'll push it as far as we can, Destin.
Sounds good. So I guess we talked about that one enough, and we got a lot to work on to go forward. Unless anyone has anything else to add, I just guess we could, or this is your job, Walt. Take it over. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'd like to start by thanking Jonathan and Robert for your time this morning and your input. It's valuable. You're both key players in what we're all doing here. So thank you very much. And I'm sure that Destin will be in contact with both of you. And if you need me to add anything on behalf of obviously the district or my position on BAWA, you're free to contact me also. Ward, thank you for your participation this morning. It's always a pleasure to have you on board. We kept some of your staff going late last night, but on a special meeting, but that's okay.
Thank you.
So other than that, is there any business to be brought before this meeting? Since I hear no requests for additional discussion, I'd like to adjourn the meeting at 9:16. Thank you all very much. The next meeting is to be held on January 18th, 2022, 8 o'clock in the morning, and hopefully at City Council chambers.
Thank you, board. And Jonathan, Robert, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.